Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, people of all ages, welcome back to the Sticky Floors podcast. I am one of your hosts, CJ. I am joined by the illustrious Mr. Will. And tonight we are talking about the movie Dark Waters. So this is a really, really, really deep movie. Surprised almost that it is a movie. And we're looking forward to talking about it tonight. Before we get started, Mr. Will, how are you doing this evening?
I'm all right, man. What's going on with you?
Doing pretty good, man. It's been a day, as they say.
Yeah.
As they also say, I'm still living the dream. And I'm glad to have this time to sit and just talk about movies and kick back and relax a little bit.
I hear that, man.
You know. So look, before we get to the synopsis, man, I know that this was one of your picks. You want to share a little bit about what made you pick this movie?
Yeah, man. It was a slow weekend, and I stumbled across this. I'd never seen this before.
Yeah,
Like,
I never saw it till we
I
just
didn't,
started
I didn't
watching
see,
till this
yeah,
until now.
yeah. I didn't see this in the theater or anything like that. So I was just scrolling, and all of a sudden it came up. And I like Mark Ruffalo's acting ability and such. But then I saw like a couple of other familiar characters, like you mentioned in the pre-production meeting, Tim Roth was in this
Mm-hmm.
joint, and then I saw Bill Pullman, and then
Mm-hmm.
I saw Tim Robbins, and I was like, oh, okay, and then Anne Hathaway was also in it as his wife, and then that really was like, okay, yeah, this is a quality cast.
Yeah, it is
You know what
definitely.
I mean? So perhaps this will be something I need to watch. And the opening scene, and I actually caught this like from the beginning of it, so I didn't miss anything or tune in later on.
Got it.
And they were showing this elderly farmer coming in to
Yes, yeah, 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 yeah.
coming into his place of business. And I'm just thinking like, oh, he's just going to a law firm to talk about. And all of a sudden, like the way he was delivering, like, I knew your grandma, and your grandmother said that,
Yeah.
and it was just really down to earth, and him just being matter of fact and just real plain about it really intrigued me.
Yeah, so it grabs you right away, and it
Yeah,
does do that. Yeah.
yeah,
I think I saw this on Netflix, so I watched
okay,
it. That's how I saw it, but, yeah, really interesting movie, man, so I know it's a lot for us to get into with it, but let's
yeah.
start off with the synopsis for those people who may not be as familiar.
But before we do that, please comment if you'd like for us to review any movies that you have on your mind, or you're intrigued and you're not necessarily sure if you want to even go through the process. Let us do it for you. And then, leave a comment. We'll definitely check that out and get back to you promptly.
Sounds
But
good.
without further ado, Dark Waters is a riveting docudrama that brilliantly intertwines drama, thriller, and slow burn elements to present an impactful and gripping legal drama. Mark Ruffalo stars as Robert Billett, a nice guy lawyer from Cincinnati, Ohio, who embarks on a relentless crusade against the powerful DuPont Chemical Corporation.
Yeah, and doesn't know what he's gonna get into until
No, not
until
at
he's
all.
already up to his neck in it, right?
Isn't that
So
life, though?
yeah, that is, especially when you're on the legal side of things.
Yeah.
So I know that there's a couple of points that you had and that I had as well for this, and I just want to start with the first one was just kind of like the impact on society part. I know that
Yeah.
that's something that's kind of all through this because of course they say that the PFOAs are in what 99% of living things on the planet, which,
Everywhere.
which I was freaked out about, right? And then I thought about the forever plastics. Like
Yeah.
that's the other thing that they talk about now that every human being has. So I was like, dang, I got to worry about plastics and chemicals. Like, who's looking out for me, man? So, what did you think about the impact on society that came out in this movie?
Well, piggybacking off of that, anxiety or feel or just nervousness.
Night terrors.
Yeah, like, dude, I know that plastics are made out of chemicals, and nobody makes plastic better than the good old folks of the US of A. And I've seen too many commercials where it'll show like these plastic bottles floating in whatever body of water, and,
Hmm.
and to this day it's a stark reminder of like, I can't ever get in any water, river, lake, pond, stream, you name it. Like, I'm fearful. Like, you got to throw some chlorine up in that joint for me to contemplate it. Um, but with that said, like you mentioned, like those forever chemicals being everywhere and leaching in your
Yeah,
body, breathing it in, whatever you consume, like, this is startling that something of this magnitude, you're talking about DuPont in Delaware, You know what I mean? Like they're not just around the way. I mean, they're not off in a far off place. They're around the corner.
Yeah.
They're strategically located. And you had, in this case, a Cincinnati, Ohio attorney trying to, do the right thing, but he does business with these people. So these are
Yeah.
his friends.
Mhm.
And sometimes we often, disassociate like, oh, that's just some nameless, faceless corporation that has nothing to do with me. No, no, no. These are run by people. You and I pull up their pants, same one leg at a time like us, eat, breathe, have families, all that stuff. But the thing that always bothers me is like, how can they hide behind a cloak of anonymity? How can they get away with this stuff? How does this even cross your mind to do these things? Like, why would you even think of that? Like, the ramifications, like, I hate to go down that rabbit tunnel. Um, you know, then I start thinking about Elon Musk and all these billionaires and trillionaires trying to explore other planets and leaving us here. Like, what's that with that movie with Matt Damon?
Oh,
Where
The Martian.
yeah,
Like The Martian.
no, the other one we puts on the bionic. He has a surgery to get the bionic stuff or whatever. He's
Oh,
just
oh yeah, I know what you're talking
all
about.
ahead.
Yeah, I
I
forgot.
can't think of the movie offhand. I'll remember it shortly. But I just start going down that trip, and I'm like, nah, I can't do that to myself.
Yeah, man, it's interesting because first of all, the idea that this movie is based on the DuPont company, right? And DuPont is one of those companies that it's like a staple of American corporations, right?
Yes,
Even if you don't, even if you don't know what DuPont makes, you know the name DuPont, and you probably have something in your house that was made by DuPont, right?
that's the scary part. Because don't
Right,
you remember that commercial? It'd be like, we do plastics, and
right,
they were proud of it.
right. Everything, right? And I thought it was really not really knowing a lot about the movie before I watched it.
Yeah.
I just thought it was like such an ambitious story to tell in a
Mm,
movie. And then, sometimes I think you would expect this to be like sort of like a fictitious company. So they
yes.
could have made up a company called, Decont or something like that. But they went with DuPont and like right away it's like, oh wow, this is like a serial, like a real story. And then I'm watching it and I'm like, wow, this is like you said, like a docudrama almost.
Yeah.
And it really begs the question of what level of responsibility do corporations owe to the society at large? And
Yeah.
who do they really view as a society at large? Because
Mm,
even within the context of the story,
yeah.
you brought it up before, the people that work at DuPont, especially in the beginning of the story, are very close to the law firm that Robert works for.
Right.
And they're more collegial and more like human beings than people representing a law firm and a major corporation. And so I think that's really a good thing, a good way the movie is done because at first it kind of gives you a humanized approach of looking at a corporation
Yeah.
before you then start thinking about all the damage that they're doing.
It's funny you mentioned that, like the damage that they're doing to the society. You're talking about like these companies, they make donations, but now you start thinking about the underhanded dealings. Like, oh, this is just a tax write off. That's why, because they do open up with the baseball field and the signs and everything like
Yeah.
that, and
Yeah.
how instrumental and how they're hiring people from in the town to work. So we bring jobs, and that's one
Yeah.
of the
And
major.
they do.
Oh, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
Jobs of death, though. Like they even mentioned, like,
But
oh, Sally was pregnant, and then all of a sudden she lost the baby, and her and the husband, and he would come home and he'd be like, hey, they'd have discussion. He'd say, don't use that anymore. So all those free things they were getting, they came with strings.
yeah.
Or they would mention how like, oh, they were hiding the women. They'd have them do other jobs and switch it up and be like, oh, you can't do this job anymore because of X, Y, and Z. Like the best way I can describe it is Cobra Commander Serpentor tactics. Like it's real slithering serpent style. Like it's just disgusting. Disgusting.
But what's interesting about that part, and I don't disagree with it, but I thought one of the parts in the movie that I thought was good that they include, or interesting that they included, is that once the class action lawsuit started, there were people in the city that worked for DuPont that
Mhm.
were against the lawsuit happening
Of course they were.
because that's where they work. Like it reminds me of something. I used to work with this guy, and he said something once that always stuck with me. What he said is the system is large enough to fund its own opposition.
Yes.
And it's like it's kind of funny because like yeah, like the in this situation, DuPont is giving money, right? They're making donations. They are providing people with jobs. And at the same time, they're doing all of this harm to the environment and to people that were living close to where they were dumping these chemicals out. And it's like this I think that like the movie tries to give you this, like, not both sides of the equation, but it does a lot to show how different people can look at the situation differently depending on their particular vantage point.
That's the scary part, though. You have these individuals highlighted by Victor Garber, where he's having a discussion like, "Yeah, yeah, I'll get you the information. Don't worry about it. I'll get it to you, Rob. You know,
Yeah.
cool." And all of a sudden, his demeanor switches up. He's like, "What are you
Oh,
doing?
oh, at the
You
dinner,
trying?"
yeah, he went
Yeah.
out, yeah, he went ham in the dinner at
Ooh,
the dinner, yeah.
yeah.
Ham wasn't even on the menu, he brought it,
No.
yeah.
And he brought that boy. I mean, glazed, honeyed, whatever, man. Like he Virginia, spiced, all different. And I don't even eat pork, but he brought everything from,
He did.
like my grandmother would say, from the rooter to the tutor. Like he brought it all. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, I thought that was your man. I thought like you told him from the onset it wasn't going to get personal. You'd be forthcoming. Now all of a sudden, he's holding you accountable. You knew how you guys got down, all the uh, uh, tactics you employed in order to hide what it was that you were doing. You knew that you shouldn't have done this, and yet you did. And I think it was very deliberate and calculated and very strategic when they opened with the scene where you have the kids basically swimming at night, skinny
Yeah.
dipping, whatever.
Mhm.
And then, hey, you kids, get out of there. And then all of a sudden, it's not to like say something like, oh, an alligator's going to get you, or there's a riptide, or some type of issue with the current or whatever. No, it's so that they don't get caught dumping
Yeah,
poison.
immediately, they're putting this stuff in the
And I'm
water, yeah.
just like, who does like what? The one thing you need on this planet, one of, is water. So what
Mhm.
would make you think that, yeah, let's just dump these nasty chemicals in something that we need? I don't understand that.
But, that kinda reminds me of, you've seen that movie, Thank You for Not Smoking,
Yeah,
right?
oh,
You've seen that
that's
movie,
my joint. We're gonna do
right.
that. We definitely
So,
gotta do
like, like, think about how many people smoke cigarettes,
that. Mhm.
right? Think about, like, how right now we're doing this podcast, somebody's buying a cigarette right now.
Mhm.
Somebody's smoking their first cigarette right now in
Or watching this and
2024.
smoking a cigarette.
Maybe so, maybe it's that satisfying. If you're watching it, if you're like, just think about the idea of, like, in 2024, with years now, decades worth of
Mhm.
Surgeon General warnings, right?
Yeah,
On the package, they got, like, you look at a pack of cigarettes now, they got like a skull and crossbones
yeah.
on it, right, in the bottom. Somebody's still using that. Somebody's still gonna be like, "Yo, you have a light." Like, you know, like, that's where the world is, like the ability of people to disassociate their actions
Mhm.
from the impact of those actions
Yeah.
is one of the things that keeps humanity constantly on the precipice of complete annihilation.
Yeah. It's so scary, yet it's so it's like compelling TV. You know what I mean? You can't look away. I remember before the onset of you remember when TiVo first dropped and everybody was like, "Man, I gotta get that." I could rewind. I don't have to worry about running to the bathroom
Mhm.
in the middle of commercial breaks. Well, that's what this is like. Literally, you got the good guy, and he's very mild mannered. He's very polite, very cordial.
Yeah,
He gets along with everybody, and he's the first one to really jump in there with both hands to say, like, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to take accountability for what I can do to bring about some type of resolution to this matter." And yet, at every twist and turn, you think, like, no, it's going to gobble him up. He's not going to last, for whatever reason, whether it be his family's pressure from his wife, his job. Tim Robbins, his character is like on him, like, hey, I supported you, but where's the money? Because
where's the
at the end,
cash at, right?
yeah, at the end of the day, it's
It's
all
still a
about,
business. Yeah,
yeah.
it's still a business, right.
And then what started off as possible paranoia actually was like viable threats upon him and his family. All of it taking a turn. I use that example to say the impact one individual can have on a society, on a town, on his neighbors, on his employers. Because his wife says it. Look, this is more than just a job for him. And
Yeah,
I think once that resonated and it actually internalized and it was able to simmer and then boil, people truly understood, like, oh, he really cares. It's not about the money. It's about trying to do right by people. And the money will help facilitate good deeds, good actions, positivity in the community.
yeah. I mean, the story of Robert's story throughout the movie, it would work if it was fiction. The
Yeah.
fact that it's reality is even more compelling
Yes.
because, in a way, his individual actions juxtaposed with the idea of the corporate malfeasance of DuPont. So
Yeah.
you have this huge corporation that's doing something that you're like, wow, that's so despicable.
Hmm.
And yet you have this one individual person that is doing something that is so incredible and
Yeah.
maybe the ultimate form of being a human being and being a person because in the process of trying to help the people, he sacrifices so much of himself and he puts his family in jeopardy and he puts his well-being and his health in jeopardy. So it's like that interplay. It's like one of those things where it's like, it happens in sports all the time where they say, man, this particular story in sports would make a great movie, but nobody
Yeah.
would believe it. This is like the corporate, version of that. It's a great story. No one would believe it, but it's the truth.
Well, I mean, he ends up winning a 650 wait, $615 million settlement.
Yeah.
Like, who would have thought that he would have him?
Yeah.
Like, he was doing the grunt work. Sure, he had associates, whatever have you, but just like that one scene depicted, they tried to basically beat him down by
Yeah.
providing him with an insurmountable amount of documents that he would have to comb through, and they were mildewy and dusty and moldy and just straight up like he had to tell the lady like, "Look, you leave, I'll handle it." And I think the fact that the way that the movie is filmed, this is a 2 decades,
Yeah.
20 years of meticulous going through studying, understanding exactly what a forever plastic was, the chemicals would do to a body, and then having to wait additional time where they would conduct the surveys,
Yep.
and him having to endure people like, well, where's the money? My brother just died, and yeah, and we just came from the like guilt tripping him like he's the one who did it. No, I'm
Yeah.
defending you.
Yeah.
And you're the ones who didn't want me to go through with this. You kept telling me about, no, not the DuPonts. No, what about the jobs they bring and what are all the other ramifications to the town, this, that. And now all of a sudden, he had to, he basically had to coerce them into giving blood work. Like that
Yeah.
was the part that really tripped me out. Oh, you mean to tell me I could get $500 just for getting some blood? I brought my whole family down. We're going to eat up tonight. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I have to incentivize you with the carrot in order to come because there's that impending doom.
Of course. I mean, like this is the nature of people is
This
like
is
that. And so that's a good segue into like the idea of like the corporate responsibility, right? So like there's this thing that we operate under in America, the idea that corporations are people, right? A corporation can be viewed as a person.
yeah, this
So
legally.
under right, legally, right. So under that banner of corporate responsibility, like what are you thinking with about that? What are you thinking?
I think that's the part that's like really heartbreaking. That reality that these corporations mean more than actual physical, living, breathing human beings. Um, I think that they are uh, despicable. I mean, I can't even come up with the accurate words to convey my resentment and disdain. Like I literally detest them. And why? These same entities literally pay little to no taxes. Cities, towns, municipalities, they're at their mercy. They're begging these people to come in.
Mhm.
Why? Because of the potential jobs that they bring to help sustain the town.
Yep.
And then you'll have these towns built around a corporation where it's basically like a loan shark or the mob. They're indebted to them. And instead of them coming out, straight from the gate and being blunt and talking down to you and, whipping out a gun and shooting you, no, they kill you slowly, like that dependence. There is no interconnectedness. It's not a symbiotic relationship. They end up consuming you until you forget where you begin and where they end. And I hate even speaking esoterically, but look at the movie. They came in, these people are patting themselves on the back by hosting a dinner, by hosting awards. Like it's sickening that they have to feel as if they need to self-aggrandize themselves by saying, "Hey, look at me. This is what I did. I provided all of this. You owe your livelihoods to me." And then simultaneously, they're killing you, little by little and slowly.
So I have a question about that part. So like DuPont, let's say DuPont is like a massive corporation, right?
Yeah,
Tens of thousands of employees.
yeah,
It's impossible that all those people know what DuPont is doing, right? There's some people that are like somebody's the chef in the cafeteria,
oh yeah.
right? Who just makes food, right? the extension does the extension of corporate responsibility go to everybody that's a part of the system, or is it only those that are the decision makers in whatever the crime is at the time?
Good question. Very good question. Um, the same way the legal system has varying degrees of murder, so there's
Mhm,
manslaughter, murder one, murder two. I think it's the same thing. There's culpability. You need to know who you get in bed with. There is no ignorance is no excuse for breaking the law. So
mhm,
therefore, um, my man said in "Devil in a Blue Dress," Tom Sizemore, rest in power. You're already in, you know, trouble as soon as you wake up. It's only a question of how deep are you in it.
mhm,
Um, so, with that being said, the cook could be well aware. Hey, did you hear about the neighbor? Which neighbor? Tom. What about Tom? His toe fell off after dipping it in that water. Word talks. They're a small community, and they've known each other since birth, like families, et cetera, et cetera. Um, at the same token, these scientists, they're not self-contained. They have the wives, and wives were gossiping. They mentioned this, like
mhm,
they when they sat them down. They were like, "Hey, Rob, do you know about this?" And like they were spilling like their guts to them, like it was a confessional. Like,
yeah,
hey, yeah, well, at least we have the two girls. The Even though the other child didn't make it, so
yeah,
be it. That's God's will. And I think this whole thing to try and excuse the behavior of the corporation by making it, well, these things happen type of attitude is just outrageous.
yeah. It's interesting because it's like I can't help but think about how broadly we define not only the corporation but also the level of complicity of individuals in the corporation. So, for example, like if we can keep it to DuPont. Okay, so DuPont is a
Yeah.
multinational corporation even at this time. So, okay, they might have a cook in their California office, right? He's like making cheeseburgers, right, on Mondays, chicken wings on Tuesdays, right? He doesn't know that they're dumping chemicals in
Yeah.
West Virginia, right? But it sounds like what you're saying is by virtue of being connected to DuPont, he has to assume a degree of culpability in DuPont's actions. And
Yeah,
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just clarifying that that's
no,
the point.
yeah, oh, that's it.
I got you. Yeah.
I mean,
So
'cause
that
you got to remember, CJ. I mean, like literally, typically, police officers aren't friends with criminals. Uh,
maybe.
in this day and age, you never know. But I can only, but I mean, like you
Maybe.
start, you start thinking though, like most people who exercise or whatever have you, they don't eat garbage. Like they don't try to justify the lifestyle they lead by working out. Like it's working out is an extension of what they do. They eat well, they go to bed at a decent hour, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
Um, so with that being said, you know, this just take your example of the cook. Yeah, he may just be serving chicken nuggets on a
He's flipping
Thursday. Yeah,
burgers in California. He doesn't
yeah.
know what's happening in West
He
Virginia.
may not know what's going on in West Virginia, but at the same token, he reads the papers at that time. He's part of the community where they may give out the corporate newspaper or newsletter or whatever have you, and he's aware on some level, on some shape or form that look, this corporation, there's now a lawsuit being brought forth against them for these questionable actions. That
Mhm.
would be enough to wake up anybody and be like, yo, maybe I need to find a new employer, or you know do make other arrangements.
Got it. Got it. But even then, he has to be aware. He has to know
Yeah,
that the situation is happening.
yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
All right. Yeah, no, that's an interesting thing, man. I know we got some other questions about corporate responsibility, so I'm gonna hold off on my thoughts about that. I don't and to be fair, like I don't disagree. I think I'm jammed by the implications of what you're saying. Like, what does that mean for all the ways in which people's daily activities and actions are somehow in some way connected to what could be a destructive force in some other part of the world or in other, that you're just not, even if you're not aware of, you may know tangentially about, but you've disassociated your everyday activities from what this larger thing is doing.
Well, that's the other thing too. I think that's the reason why you have the chaos, madness, and wars that are presently going on. You know, what's the stereotype when someone from the United States goes overseas? Ignorant, dumb Americans, brash, nobody does, John Wayne, cockiness like Americans, and I think it's that stereotype that follows people that have a passport with USA attached to it. So I would just think that the same thing would hold true with respect to corporate responsibility. You have these individuals like, okay, so how are you living? What are you presenting to the masses? A lot of uh, discussions at least I've seen on various social media sites where they're talking about CEOs being paid an outrageous amount as far as salary and benefits and such, but it's not trickling down to the actual
The actual
employees,
employees, yeah.
and they're not able to have a sustainable living wage. Well,
Mhm.
same thing holds true here. Yeah, sure, you're helping the society by providing jobs to whatever local community, town X, but at
Yeah,
the same time you're poisoning their well water. Like, these are people
right.
that actually have septic tanks, and they don't have a utility system underground that's fully built like that. So you have to start weighing the pros and the cons, and the individuals who are actually building these things, they live in the community.
Yeah. And I mean, then it really gets you into the notion of the um insatiable exploitative nature of just capitalism on the whole, and just how that can be blown way out of proportion when you're
Yeah.
talking about a multinational corporation, because there are so many checks and balances that exist in a corporate structure to, in one sense, help people disassociate their role and responsibility from what happens, but also to give someone the consideration of how does this thing affect yearly revenues, year over year growth, the stock price, what the investors think. All of those things are part of it as well. And it's just the movie, like, it just does a really good job at sort of just pulling those notions and ideas together without being overly heavy-handed in the way that it's talking about.
No, that's a great point that you bring up. This movie doesn't sound too preachy, if you will.
It's not, yeah.
It doesn't try to bombard you with too much of a, hey, listen to me, I'm trying to indoctrinate you, I'm on my soapbox, et cetera, et cetera. But what it does try to do is present you with a lifestyle of the way things could be, the way things should be. And not necessarily I'm speaking about utopia, just common decency, living the golden rule. Like, here you have this family man, and he's a very dutiful father. He provides. His wife has they live a traditional lifestyle where the wife
Mhm.
stays home, and
Yeah,
she looked after the children and maintained the household, therefore providing him the ability to go further outside of the home to bring home a living wage. Simultaneously, the wife hasn't, it doesn't mean she's incompetent, it doesn't mean that she's not intelligent or capable of doing more. What it means is that she's diverting her energies into fulfilling the family as a unit, that leadership there. I mean, because you'll see he bow downs to her in a plethora of scenarios where she tells him, like, hey, this is what time it is, you tell me what it is, do you want to leave, do you understand you're losing your family, do you understand
yeah,
how out of touch you are? And I think the fact where there were scenes where the sons and her are in church, but he's not there. And then all of a sudden, towards the end, they're all in church together. I think that
yeah,
signifies them coming together, of him actually having a coming to the mountain moment, if you will, where, he starts to understand and internalize. Because, it's different when he's just experiencing these things on his own. But him going to the hospital after having the stroke,
yep,
seizure, whatever have you, I think that crystallized things. Like, that was the aha moment, symbolizing, like, yeah, I can't keep trying to devote myself to two masters.
yeah.
I've tried the best that I can with what I have, but something's got to give.
Well, I think one of the best scenes in the movie is the one where his wife wakes up. And remember, he's taking all the pots out and he's throwing them
Yeah,
away because he
great
finally
scene.
figures out what
Great scene.
the PFOAs are, right? And she thinks he's lost his mind. And he sits her down and he says, like, I'm going to lay out all the details of the case. And if after I do this, you think I shouldn't do it anymore,
Yeah.
I won't do it. And he does. And she's good with him going on from that point, because I think she sees the significance of it too as well. And it's hard because I think when you encounter like your purpose, and I think that's what Robert does in this movie. His purpose is a journey that he has to walk by himself, but people who love him have to walk with him,
Yeah.
right? And the hard part is the people that are walking it with him, they don't see it as their purpose, but they have
Mhm.
to believe in his dedication to his purpose enough to be willing to go with him on that journey. Because it takes away his family life. He's not present with his family. He's not
Mhm.
present with his kids. His children's joke about Mary Magdalene and prostitution is kind of like a thinly veiled way of saying this is what happens when dad's not around,
Yeah.
right? The relationship with his wife is strained. His boss is looking at him kind of sideways, right? And these are the people that they support him, but they don't share his purpose. They don't actually see the goal of where he's trying to go to. And so, because of that, he has to bear the burden of doing the work, but then also the burden of the expectations that other people are putting on him that are just following along with him.
Brilliant soundbite. Ooh, my man is cooking tonight. I will also add to that by saying his journey is the true hero version in modern day society,
Absolutely.
where the dragon he's trying to slay is through legalities and paperwork and a whole different language. I think that's the reason why a lot of people feel uncomfortable with him, is that he's not your typical lawyer going before a judge, you know,
Hmm.
and all flash and pomp and all that. No,
Yes.
he is a
Yeah.
researcher, and his thing is to become immersed into whatever the topic is. So the more knowledge he has, the more capable he can present a very strong defense, as well as anticipate what the other side will come with. So that scene where, where we laughed it off earlier, where they dump all these boxes and the residual stuff in the air is floating, they're cracking up. Later on when he does confront his wife with, this is what I've been doing, and it's so typical too. Micro macro. You're not with me enough, so that's why I cheated. I'm lonely. I need. Why don't you go and uh, why don't you go and find a better job so we can move out of this crappy apartment? Oh, you work all the time. You're not around. I have all these things, but all I wanted was you. Like, look but don't touch, taste but don't swallow. Like all these mixed messages. And it's not until he says, in not so explicit terms, like, look, you want to know what I'm doing? This is what I'm doing. Here's the facts. You want to call me crazy, but you're supposed to be my peace. So, all
Mhm.
right, I'll let you in. Now, can you handle it? Is it too much for you? It reminds me of that Dave Chappelle joke. Like, did I blow your mind? Is it too much?
Yeah.
Well, how about
Yeah.
this? And now all of a sudden she's like, oh, all right, keep
Yeah,
doing
she
your thing.
sees she sees his purpose.
But then
Yeah.
she comes back later on and she's like, well, our marriage is suffering. The kids
Yeah.
can't do this. And
Mhm.
like, it's still complaint after complaint.
But once again, though, I mean, that's the burden of you doing your purpose. Like your purpose is what you were here to do. It doesn't mean everybody else is there to do it with you. They make the decision to follow along with him. And and like, to her credit, the wife didn't divorce him. Some people would have got divorced in this in
There's
that
too
kind
many
of
examples.
situation.
Yeah.
Or his job didn't fire him. Some people, because some businesses, first of all, a lot of, I'm sure there's more than one law firm that would have not even let him do the case
Oh,
at
not
all,
at
and would
all.
have said, "Are you kidding? This is destroys the business for us to even do this." Which that's going to get to one of my cake scenes a little bit later.
But I
But
think it's because he's brought in a lot of money for that
yeah,
business, and that's why
yeah.
they gave him the leeway.
Yeah, and also just to go back to like the way that Mark Ruffalo portrays the character, and it goes back to something you said. He's not a flashy lawyer.
No.
He's not like this really smooth trial attorney. He's almost got like like a Columbo, like that old show Columbo,
Yeah, yeah,
kind of
yeah, yeah.
something a little bit sloppy about him. The whole
Right, right.
movie, it's kind of unassuming.
Yeah.
That I think,
Dim-witted professor.
yeah, that just kind of makes it where that unassuming nature that he has
Yes.
allows his accomplishment to seem even more superhuman,
Oh, yeah.
right? If if this role was played by like Matthew McConaughey, you would almost kind of see it
Lincoln
as
Lawyer.
like, yeah, you'd almost kind of see it like, oh yeah, of course. Like look at him. Like
Mhm.
he's good looking, he's got a
Yeah,
six
yeah,
pack,
yeah.
you gotta look at his hair, like it would be a different movie.
Yeah.
But Mark Ruffalo is not like that kind of person, and that's no knocks to him, but it fits perfectly with the David and Goliath kind of the unassuming hero against this behemoth of a corporation narrative.
Yeah, I think that hits harder because everybody loves the underdog. Everybody
Of
roots
course, yes.
for that person to be able to, conquer all. The whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps thing too, because he is a farm person. Remember, when he goes back to his grandmother's spot, he's
Yeah,
like, "Wait, I was on that farm and I did
yeah,
these things," and he could understand these are the type of people, his people, where he
yeah.
comes from. So he feels almost a moral obligation to them more so than anything.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up the grandmother because her role is pivotal. Whenever you have like that kind of matriarchal figure
Yeah.
in the family, people feel like we have to give this deference to her.
Oh yeah.
And it's that deference to her that actually makes him take
Yeah,
the case
you
more seriously.
started yeah.
Because at first he's like, "Nah, you don't want to talk to me. You want to talk to somebody else." Blah blah whatever.
That's not how we
After he
do
goes
this.
and sees the grandmother, then he's like, "All right, I guess I got to take this more seriously." So that her role is so powerful in it because it's really the thing that pushes him
Uh-huh.
into it by reminding him, as you said, of where he comes from.
I think that's the funny thing too, like, she doesn't tell him directly, like, "Take the case." It's more like,
No,
check out this photo album. When you were a kid, you rode this
yeah,
horse on this farm, and
yeah,
now she's like got her hooks in them, and it's like that subtle guilt trip. Like, oh, you remember what this used to taste like? You remember how I used to take all this time to prepare this meal and this, that, and the third, and this is what it was all encompassing of.
yeah.
I think the thing too is like how that farmer came to him, like very gruff, wearing
Oh yeah,
overalls
yeah,
and everything. Like you,
yeah,
you can see he's not one to play around,
yeah.
mince words. Like he was like, yo, look.
With a cow liver in his pocket.
Yeah, like, here's the deal, man. Peep this one time. This
Right,
is not normal.
right.
Your grandmother told me to come here and check you out, boy.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, what?
It was good, man. It was good. I
Yeah,
like how they did that, man.
yeah,
So on to other things we like, man. Let's jump into some of the cake. I know you got a couple slices, and I
yeah,
got a
yeah,
couple
yeah.
things too, man.
This is some of the things off the top. Obviously, the cast, like I said earlier, Mark
Very
Ruffalo,
strong
Tim Robbins.
cast. Yeah.
You know, yeah, definitely strong, strong cast. Um, But the raising of awareness, which we talked about, very key. I wasn't aware that it was to this degree. Like we're all this whole term of global warming. No, you call it what it is. It's pollution. All right.
Mm.
Let's not mince words. And I'm not giving any ex vice president credit for discovering this. No, you're not a lab technician at the very least. You damn sure aren't a scientist. Like
I thought Al Gore was credited with discovering the internet.
him and what's the man's name? Him and uh, what's the guy? Terrence Howard. They discovered everything on this planet.
Oh man,
There was nothing
Terrence.
before them. So,
Terrence.
but nonetheless, I
Not that
digress.
guy.
The faith part, that component, the belief in oneself, in the
Mhm.
family, as well as in a higher power. So there's a pecking order. There is a belief system in which it's demonstrative throughout everything that he does. He's very consistent, very deliberate in how he goes about his business. I think that's a key point especially in this day and age where you need these type of icons, role models, whatever you want to term it, these
Yeah.
figures that provide an example of, hey, this is how we go about things. Too often we see how not to go about things by actually seeing the person be the mess up. Well, here we have an individual of saying, look, I'm on the path. I'm not telling you to do it, but hey, maybe you might want to come around or come along for the journey. Um, and I also think that the duty and commitment that he displays, not just him actually doing the work and it's tedious and it's boring and it's not glamorous, but I mean the fact that he even bothers in that scene where they're in the conference room, and I hate the fact that it's the one black guy there, like, hey, we do business with them, and why
Yeah.
are you like
Yeah.
he's the lone dissenting voice and he's going hard, and I'm just
Yeah.
like, if this
Yeah.
is not another stereotype to
Yeah.
further the myth.
Yeah, that almost made my hate category, man. But we talking about the cake though.
But the fact that that counterbalance where he was like, look, this is how we need to go about doing things. We have a responsibility to not only ourselves, but to our children and to the townsfolk. They have put their trust in us,
Mm-hmm.
like, and I think that goes overlooked sometimes. This movie is about trust. The townsfolk trusted the DuPonts to do right by them. The town has it talks about the political social ramifications about how, look, there's these ultra PACs and these super PACs and these mega PACs. Everybody's got a pack of cigarettes, whatever. And then, they have these lobbyists and they're the only ones who have access. And it wasn't like that. Literally, 1863, 1865, you could go up to the president and tell him exactly how you felt. Hey, not messing with this. Well, certain select, but nonetheless, certain people could have access to Joe Schmo could have access to him. You could see him walking the streets in DC. And I think that part is emphasized throughout this entire movie. And I think that definitely is like my major like about this, the major slice of cake that I'm messing with. What you got?
Got it. So there's a couple scenes that jumped out to me that I
Yeah.
really liked in this. The first is like that cow scene, the rabid cow scene,
Yeah.
because that I think is also the scene where Robert is there with the farmer, and it's like it becomes like the cow, the danger that the cow presents because it's suffering. I think it makes it like really real for Robert's character because at that point he's still kind of like, look, I can win this for you individually. I can get you money so you can leave the
Yeah.
land. And then when he sees that, he starts to see like the scope and scale of the problem being much bigger than just moving one family away from there. So that was the first one. You talked about the partner scene, the partner meeting scene. So that was another one that was really,
Yeah.
that really stood out for me. And then I love the hospital scene. I don't think that sorry, when Anne Hathaway and I think it's the main head lawyer, I guess,
Tim Robbins.
Tim Robbins, yeah, when they're talking, and you alluded to it a little bit earlier when she talks about like Robert's upbringing, how
Yeah.
all he really has is his family and that job, and it means so much more to him than the job. I just thought that was like they gave something to Anne Hathaway to really kind of show her acting chops,
Yep.
and I thought she just delivered the scene so well, and the way that the scene is shot, Tim Robbins is taller than her.
Yes.
So at first it kind of seems like he's in charge of the conversation, almost like it's moving this way. But then as she's talking, it levels. And it like all of a sudden she becomes the dominant person in the conversation. And I just thought it was just executed very well. So that was one of the scenes that I really liked. And then last the deposition scene I'm talking about when he's doing the deposition with the real CEO
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
DuPont,
Yeah.
and he's like going through and he makes him read the statements and like read the things that are highlighted. You know, it's just it's a really good scene. I think as a viewer, it gives you the sense of okay, somebody's being held accountable. So I
Yeah.
like that. And then I don't know who the actor is, but the guy who's playing the CEO, he does this great job of like kind of in the beginning almost sitting there as if like, I'm only here so I don't get sued kind of vibe. And then
Like,
his humanity gets kind of pricked when he has to read the things that were in the reports. And I thought the actor did a really good job like with his eyes and his body language like getting more and more deflated as the deposition goes on. So those were my cake scenes.
the actor's name is Barry Mulholland, and he was playing Charles O'Holliday Jr., the CEO of DuPont.
Yep.
That's the joint that was saw. And minor correction, I think I said Tim Roth. It's actually Tim Robbins.
Tim Robbins, yeah.
Yeah, it's not Tim Roth. He's not in this movie, but good actor though. I think the thing that I just want to piggyback on a few things that you brought out that were really dope. Um, One, Anne Hathaway, like you mentioned earlier, she doesn't have many lines, but when she does, they're very impactful,
Yeah.
insightful, very intelligent. And I think she does her character a good service, a good representation as far as the importance of a solid family unit, of a
Oh,
partnership
absolutely.
between a husband and wife, especially with one whose career requires long hours.
Yeah.
Sometimes, especially in this day and age, you'll hear things about infidelity and this, that, and the third. But no, they have a very strong faith based relationship where they have a lot of commonalities and a lot of
Hmm.
things that they cherish together that are of importance. That's key. Another thing that you mentioned with regards to just the overall feel of the movie, um, kind of like capsulized with the shooting of the cow, the ramifications. One, he mentions it. People eat beef. These cows also provide milk. So
Yeah.
you're drinking whatever toxins are within that cow. Cows are going mad. God forbid, you have a child and all of a sudden, rabid cow goes on you, because some of these farms, they're also petting zoos and things of that ilk where
Yeah.
that they're coming around the public. Now you have this mass pandemonium. Like, I remember distinctly where you'd hear about swine flu, bird flu, and all these other
Mad
contagions.
cow disease.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
and
Mad cow
that's
disease.
and
I
that's
remember.
where I was going. So now you have this epidemic going on where people are afraid, fearful to go to the supermarket, and the ramifications are, stocks plummeting, mass hysteria, people rioting, all because of negligence on the part of a corporation who didn't want to dispose of toxic waste in a very civilized and responsible manner. Or how about, don't even create that product using these means, use something else. I think another thing that you touched on, last but not least, is you know there's that deposition scene, and this is where actors are flexing their chops, where it's not necessarily the uh, actor's job to make good writing even better. It's the actor's job to make poor writing good, or at least ultimate, to its utmost abilities. And you have these gentlemen there, like you mentioned. It's not just delivering of the words, the cadence. It's also the facial
Yeah.
expressions, the
Hmm.
the body language that they're displaying, the ins and outs, the back and forth, the volley, if you will. I think they did an excellent job in those scenes where they're in very close, intimate quarters and they're
Yep.
discussing things that may be difficult. But you never see Mark Ruffalo lose his patience. You never see him outside his demeanor, outside himself.
Yeah.
He's able to hit these benchmarks like with ease.
Yeah. No doubt. No doubt, man. So there's a lot that we liked,
Yeah.
a lot of cake. I know there's a couple things we didn't like as much.
Yeah, kind of nitpicking here, but I think the parts of religion that are brought up, it may isolate or ostracize the audience that doesn't adhere to the Christian faith.
Mhm.
Um, I'm nitpicking here. For those that do study, it's not necessarily an indictment of Christianity, but more so of just the fact that, hey, how does this relate to me? And I think that's the goal of all movies, is to show, everyone can respond to this. Everyone has a family. Everyone is worried about the health and safety of their family and or loved ones, whether it be an adopted child, blood relative, all the way to a friend, or even just your, oh, I see the crossing guard every day and we have a nice little back and forth. um, so that part, may be a sticking point for others that I'm just trying to highlight. The premise of the movie, the fact that, man, call me naive, the fact that, this corporation could do these heinous acts repeatedly for over 20 years. It's still ongoing to this day.
Mhm.
And I don't care how much money they could give you, they can't bring back life. Countless people were giving their stories to Mark Ruffalo's character, Rob Billet, and shout out to him and his wife, of, hey, look, my relative died. In fact, the guy who actually brought the case to his attention, he ends up dying from cancer. His wife
Yep.
dies from cancer, and they
Yep.
had kids. You know what I mean? Who's going to help them out? None of the kids could care less about that money. The guy even tells you, the farmer even tells you from the onset, I don't care about that money. It's not about me moving or anything like that. This is about bringing people to justice. This is holding
Yeah.
them accountable and responsible for their misdeeds. And then last but not least, CJ touched upon the cow scene. I think that depending upon the age of your children, and there's a reason, yes, I know that they put rated R or PG-13, et cetera, et cetera. But the fact is, if it is a movie night and you're like, oh, this sounds like a very responsible movie for my 10-year-old, well, understand and know your child. And hence the disclaimer that we put out there, like, look, if you don't want us to spoil for you, fast forward or, skip this altogether. But that the scene in which the cow was shot, it's a very touching scene, because he also goes up to the cow and expresses, like, a guilt and a remorse of why it had to come to this.
Hmm.
So it's done in a way that, yes, it is a very mature way, but you are killing something.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have any real things for this movie.
Yeah,
Because I really think it's just very really well done. If I were to nitpick anything, it might be the length of it.
I knew it. Yep,
It
I
might
knew.
be the length. It's like it is a long movie,
Yes,
right? And you have to. And the other thing is that it's long, and it's also something that you have to be paying attention to.
yeah,
So I don't think this is one where sometimes you can watch a movie, you can enjoy it, like, but you can like watch it, it'd be on the screen, and you're also like maybe on your phone or something
yeah.
like. You really can't do that with this one because
No,
you're gonna miss a lot of the education that it takes to actually understand all the things that are going. Not only the legal proceedings, but what is a PFOA, like how all of that kind of works. You have to be plugged into it, and I think it's not. It's like right at that point where it's like educational and it's engaging, but the entertainment factor is a little bit off. So
yeah.
it's not like it's not a knock because I think like it's this is something. I mean, we're gonna get to this in a second, but I would recommend anyone seeing this movie. But it did just feel a little long, and I will just say that I'm not even sure what you would cut out. Like I
All
like
right.
sometimes I can look at something and say I would cut this part out, but I don't really know what that is. It just felt a little long to me.
The movie is 2 hours and 8 minutes or 2 hours and 10 minutes, something along those lines.
Yeah.
And
Oh, it feels longer.
but no, no, no. But that, to my point, is there's a lot of added features that were left out in the introductions and things of that nature that would make it even longer if they did include it. Um, so you really are talking about a 3 hour movie. To really get the ins and outs. And
Yeah.
there's a countless enough of books that go along with this that go into more detail. There's
Yeah.
also the websites where they're actually still doing the work
Yep.
of trying to bring these corporations, because it's not just DuPont, of all these irresponsible corporations who are polluting the water, the land, and the air. We happen to just be talking about dark water where they're dumping the chemicals into the bodies of water, but no, this is far more extensive. This is going into people's foods, people's clothing. In fact, some of the stuff that yoga pants is a really hot topic. Those things are toxic. They're made of plastics,
Right.
so it's going into orifices and leaching into your skin and into your organs and in your bloodstream. So, ladies, just be mindful. Those things that you think look cute on you or whatever have you. There's a cost to that.
There we go. There we go. All right, so we got questions.
Yeah, no doubt.
So you got questions. I actually don't have any for this one. But I know you got some. So let's jump into it, man.
Yes, sir. So, why do you think Rob took this case? Why didn't he just say no and say, what, I got a nice corporate gig here. I'm gonna ride with that.
Yeah, I think it's the grandmother's influence. I think we talked about that. I
Yeah.
think he probably would not have been able to go back and like have dinner at grandma's
Mm,
house if he didn't take this case because she would ask him about it all the time.
yeah.
I also think like he remembered that he had a personal connection not only to that part of the country but also to the idea of being on a farm and just the what those memories meant to him growing up as someone who didn't have like a really robust childhood and world anyway.
Yeah.
Those moments became really important to him, so I
So you
think that's
saying
why.
so you're saying he had some home training. I got you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
We all recognize that money's no good if you're not alive to spend it. So why do these corporations ignore their responsibility to the public and the environment and try to persuade with these lobbyists and such?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think, it goes back to like, what's the purpose of the corporation? It's a business. Purpose of a business is to make money. If a business isn't making money, then it dies. The money is like blood for a person.
Hmm.
So every every action, at some point, it's going to run into the bottom line of is it making money or is it losing money? And if it
Hmm.
doesn't make more than it loses, then that company won't be around.
Hmm.
That corporation won't be around. And I think that you know, like people that work. If you've ever known somebody who works in a corporation, whatever the corporation is, at some levels, I think people are very disconnected from like the mission of the place. But for people that really care about any place that they work, they also care about that place continuing to be there after they're gone. And that makes you make all kinds of decisions. And some of them, like in this case, are terrible decisions. But I do think that some people at some levels are plugged into the idea of legacy. And for many people, their job is their legacy. So
Mm.
they draw tremendous personal value from what they were able to accomplish professionally, how many years they were able to stay at some place. We see like people and like NBA players who, are like
Ah,
celebrated for spending their whole career at one team, right? They talk about Dirk Nowitzki or Kobe Bryant. People say they played their whole career in one team.
they
Think
did it
about
the
how great
right
that is,
way.
right? I think that some people also see it with the corporation as well. Like I spent my whole career at this place. I
Right.
worked from the bottom. I started in the mailroom. Now I'm the COO or whatever the case may be. I think those are the things that drive people. And like I said in the beginning, I think people can disassociate themselves from like the impact of their actions and decisions.
Gotcha. No, that's dope. That's dope. Uh, how do you define and measure success? And with that definition, was Rob a successful individual or a failure? Why?
Yeah,
Why or why not?
I think the success is really how much like your actions are aligned with your purpose.
Hmm.
And Rob is a super success because, like I said, knowing that this is a true story, knowing that when you see like his upbringing, when you see that his upbringing connected his grandmother with this
Yeah.
farmer who could come to him,
Hmm.
that he decided to take it on, that there were these opportunities where he could have said not to, I don't want to do this, but he did it anyway. He maxed out. He's still maxing out because he's still in the court cases now with DuPont even to this day, right? So he's still doing his work, but you can't tell me that Rob Billet wasn't put on this planet Earth to do this thing that he's doing now. So on the virtue of that, yeah, he's a super success, man. He's living his best life.
Best life. What does it mean by describing? What does his wife mean by describing herself as a recovering attorney?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many
Because
negative jokes about lawyers, right?
yeah,
Like, I heard this one, what do you call like 30 lawyers at the bottom of an ocean? And the answer is like a good
chum.
start.
Oh,
Like that's like these jokes exist, right? Like so many people think so negatively about the profession of lawyers,
yeah.
even though oddly enough, it's like one of those things that people love to watch on television and in movies. But like there's so much of it. So I think like her joke is basically saying like it's almost like a self-deprecation. I
Mm.
know that I'm in this terrible kind of thing and I'm escaping it. Like I'm escaping the addiction and now I'm like a better person.
Oh, that's funny. Uh, should the actual leadership members of a corporation be held personally responsible for the bad decisions made on behalf of the company? If so, what should be the punishment? If not, why?
Yeah, the punishment part is tricky because it just depends on what the legal ramifications are of it. I do think that
So, should they be held to some type of
yeah,
legal?
absolutely. Absolutely. If you make a decision that in fact is doing harm to people and to the public, however the big or small people is, you should anticipate there's going to be a consequence for that.
Mm.
And there's going to be a legal consequence for that. I think what's going to be interesting is, especially in like the time that we live in now, defining what is culpability in these situations.
Mm.
So, like, for example, can you hold Mark Zuckerberg responsible for what content is put on Facebook or Instagram? Because he owns the company, because he makes a decision that this thing is going to exist, does he also become responsible for all the content that gets put out there? And
Yes.
that becomes a little different than like DuPont, the guy at DuPont making a decision like, hey, yeah, put the waste in that village. I mean, that city over there. I think that's going to be the tricky part. Is going to be the attribution of responsibility,
Mm.
and what does that mean legally in time and over time? Because now the ideas of damage, what causes people damage, is a lot more within your hands to decide whether or not you want to be damaged in that way. So if people, so and once I'm not trying to be insensitive to anyone in different situations, but like people whose self-esteem is damaged by social media
Mm.
also have to have some sort of responsibility for being on the social media in the first place. And can they offset that and present that strictly as an issue for the company, whatever that company is that runs that platform, for their well-being? And
Oh,
what does that mean when you know that something can cause damage? Do you still have a responsibility for letting it do damage to you?
oh, no question. Now you're talking about disclaimers, culpability, liability. Um, the ironic part is it is a thin line of what they term shaming versus personal accountability. You don't blame the victim for the circumstances that they find themselves in, a la if someone has been assaulted. Um, you don't say, well, it's because you were
Yeah, I know what you're
wearing
saying.
whatever.
Yeah,
But at the same token, if you choose to be in an environment where it's a known criminal organization or criminal activities are prevalent there, you kind of know what you're getting into. If
yeah.
you want to be safe, you don't put yourself in those predicaments.
Sure,
But
but I think it's easier. That's like almost like the 1986 problem. The
mm,
2026 problem is, what do you do with all of these different ways that people can get stuff, get a
yeah,
hold of this information and have access to this, and your
yeah,
phone has can do everything. Like, who's responsible then? And who do you hold accountable? And what, like, that is a different thing. So, to get to the core of your your question, yes, of course, people should be held responsible,
yeah.
and whatever the legal ramifications are, that's to be worked out between lawyers, of course, over 30 years. It looks like, but the question will now become, where does that culpability lie
Hmm.
as things become less and less tangible.
Well, it
You know,
depends if you're writing that algorithm, if you're writing that program that solicits, like to use your Mark Zuckerberg analogy, um, then yeah, you're at fault. If you're hands on, if you're CFO, CEO, COO, who's doing also day to day things such as programming, and you permit that, then yeah, I think that's on you. Which goes into my popcorn. Um, I'm rocking with 4.5. CJ and I talked about this in the pre-production meeting, and I was pretty firm on being at 4, but he raised some very strong points, which have allowed me to give them another half of buttery good stuff. Um, this movie, yeah, there's certain points in it where it drags on. It's kind of a little like tedious in certain areas, and it doesn't always capture your attention. But that I think that again, I think that's deliberate. I think the way that they filmed it was to impress upon the viewer that, hey, this is a very grueling subject.
yeah,
It was a
absolutely.
very lengthy process.
Yep.
The knight in shining armor didn't come and slay the dragon and kiss Sleeping Beauty and ride off into the sunset. No, it didn't go down like that. This was a very arduous task that was taken up by one man in particular, who, amidst all of his trials and tribulations, was able to come out successful and to be a shining light and a credit to his community, his family, his friends, his employer, and his loved ones.
Yeah, I give it 4.5 also, and for the same reason you said. I think this is 1,000% a movie that everyone should watch
Mhm.
at least once,
Yeah.
because it really, first of all, I think you learn a lot,
Oh yeah.
which, if you can watch something and learn a lot, I think that's great. And then it just reminds you of the things that can go on in America, in the world, that you may not know about, and how much that can impact you, even if you didn't know that it was. So yeah, man, I think 4.5 is good for this, and yeah, that's what we got, man.
Yeah.
So you got a summary for us, man? You got to close out.
Yeah, man. Directed by Todd Haynes, Dark Waters meticulously captures the exhaustive and spiritually draining process of waging a legal battle against a corrupt system. The storyline follows Billet's journey as he aids Walter Tennant, a humble cattle farmer whose livestock have been mysteriously dying due to suspected toxic waste contamination. The film's slow burn narrative builds tension as Billet uncovers a dark secret linking unexplained deaths to DuPont's chemical waste. Through personal sacrifices and at immense personal risk, Billet's quest for truth becomes a detective story in itself, portraying the lawyer's tenacity and integrity, which I might say is leading up to another very integral and man of purpose and action and integrity. CJ, why don't you let these kind folks know what we get into next week?
Yeah, so next week we're gonna do Predator. so
Woo!
so a different type of monster.
And different type of man with purpose.
Different type of man with purpose, different type of monster. So we'll be looking forward to talking about that. Once again, the Sticky Floors podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts. We are on Apple Podcasts, we are on Spotify Podcasts, we are on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, and as Mr. Will said from the beginning, we need you to subscribe to that. That helps us to grow the channel and opens us up to some more opportunities. So we appreciate, like, if you listen to this, you liked it, hit that subscribe button. We appreciate that, and we will see you next week. Peace.